Hi, everybody. Nice to see a few people here. And hopefully, people remember that tonight's the night. We have a couple of interesting questions here. Uh, one from Toshi, another one from Lee. And I hope everybody is doing okay. And for those of us in Canada, still dealing with winter, and very glad to hear that it's warmer down south. Toshi says, in the divine, life divine, Sri Aurobindo, in my paraphrasing, he says, suggests that matter and energy are both endowed with divinity, but are opposites, opposing forces, or opposing forces that ultimately need to be reconciled. He suggests that West, Europe, and North America, I guess, has material riches and powers, but it has a bankruptcy in the things of the spirit. And also states that the intellect has sought solutions in all problems in matter, but has not found satisfaction in these answers. He suggests in the East, India, that there has been a great heaping up of the treasures of the spirit, but has also been a bankruptcy of life. And he's got life as capital, which implies to Sri Aurobindo, it would imply that it was divine life. It's a really interesting question because Toshi goes on to say, what does Sri Aurobindo mean in terms of bankruptcy of life, still capitalized? Is this bankruptcy of life referring to a withdrawal from society, life, to focus on the spirit, meditation, and a cave? Okay, how do you deal with this? I think the number one thing that we have to understand, and it's difficult to understand, that there is at play a flow of support, love, divinity, if you wish, as Sri Aurobindo is talking about it, that operates in every personality. What that really means is that energy comes into us and it is used by us unknowingly, unconsciously, or consciously. Often we think of that as almost like a will, personal will, but it's an intensity or expression of love or flow that can be used for any purpose inside a living being. That is attached to it is the use of it for any purpose. So thinking about that for a couple of seconds, what we're saying is we can do whatever we want in these matter planes with that flow that comes into us that we usually give credit to an individual. In other words, that personality is very expressive, interactive, and she or he uses it for a purpose that relates to themselves. Primarily relating to the idea of pleasing themselves, comforting themselves, engaging with that flow for a purpose that is commensurate, or at least is involved with life on these matter planes. Okay, that is a universal flow. That is a loving flow, kind of a divine flow. All give. And then suggests that matter and energy are both endowed with divinity. And that is the divinity he's talking about. But are opposite, opposing forces that ultimately need to be reconciled. In other words, there, as one engages with a higher state, the individual begins to know that that flow that's coming into them is part of what they can use for their own purposes. That's the opposite part. And a part that comes into them for the purpose of helping them to reach out of that matter and engage with a higher state. If you can see that that internalization that we have is related to a higher state, but is wrapped around by purposes relating to matter and personalizations, then you begin to think of that different flow or that higher higher in relationship to the chakras, for example, because if you can affiliate that flow that comes in through those centers in root, gonad, and solar plexus purposes, that can link right up into the higher states of us at that level, then we're looking at using that interaction with higher states to engage and bring up the energy from those root, gonad, and solar plexus areas at its lower engagement to interact with the upper centers, the heart, the throat, the brow, the crown. But in that orientation, the personality is still the involved with those so-called divine levels. In other words, you can become credited as being spiritual because the energy is flowing right to the top of the head, but it's the personality that gets the credit. This is what he's trying to put across. This is a very difficult area, especially one can say he talks about India in particular, but it can be anywhere that still relates to the personality being valued as a spiritual person because the energy is moving to the top of their head. Fundamentally, it's difficult to understand this at our level because we already have decided what spiritual is and what it isn't. This is hard for us because we are constantly involved with the idea of competition between people who are even spiritual. And this goes on to larger groups of spiritual units, so called. And we do this simply because we're trained to do this. This is just how we function on this. And we're taught to function this way. Our school system is the same way. We're graded. And of course, I'm not saying that's negative. I'm saying that's what happens. Therefore, why would we not grade everything else? It's not the school system, it's every system. Anything and everything that relates to community relates to grading. And this is part of what we do to enable ourselves to feel comforted by value. And this is the value of the matter world. And evaluation of the matter world. So he's saying here's a dilemma. In our development as a species, since he was a chakra person, Kundalini person, in the development of our species, energy can still go from the root center all the way up to the top of the head, and you will cultivate and make yourself into a form that is superior to others, because it is not normal to have that energy functioning all the way to the top of your head. This is like being in kindergarten in spirituality, but it's functional. And you then can use that energy for your own purposes. Cases in point, some swamis, and it's it's not a negative thing, consider themselves more important than the swami down the street. And if you have 10,000 students instead of only 9,220, you're a better swami than the other swami. That has nothing to do with spirituality whatsoever, but it has to do with the regulating of the matter world. And so therefore this is the song we sing. We sing that kind of song because it relates to being valued and elevated, kind of. He was well able to recognize and understand, Sri Aurobindo, that there was more in divine living, divine life, than a definition of divine from our perspective. He understood that universal flow of force could be functional here on this plane for a personality's point of view. But at other levels of that linking of energy from top to bottom, in these centers or chakras or whatever you want to call them, valves. In the linking of these, there are different levels that lie within each and every one of them. When we engage in the system close to our bodies, it feels like it's a torrential, energetic experience. Our personality either grumbles or is valued or feels tremendously more important than other people who don't have that horrendous flow that's obvious to them. And there's a superiority thing that's set up in the personality. That's what he's worried about. And he should be. Because this is what happens in our world. So it's more like, oh, he noticed that and he was able to express this in a way that would be at least understood by some. This is very difficult to understand when that system is not set up. And our systems are not set up to understand from the top down. We're set up to understand from the bottom up. So in his way of thinking, at another level, which is not the highest of all levels because we continually grow, there is a humility. The humility is not expressed. What is expressed is the subtlety of a flow that an individual may perceive, but knows the perception is just an act of knowing that flow is there not for her or him, but to express through them because they can be okay with not mentioning it or talking too much about it. Expressed through them towards others so that they can begin to grow internally, consciously. And that is called the divine life. Whereas many who are classified as spiritual live in the matter life because it is but a step towards understanding deeper. In fact, most of those highly developed beings don't have any students at all. No disciples. They walk. They have a lonely life. They engage only with their relationship with the energy, that universal energy that can pour through them because their system is trained to receive it for a purpose that relates to a higher state as opposed to the purpose that relates to a personality's system that's set up to be valued by others. They don't seek to be valued by others. And for us, that would be very difficult because we would have to figure that stuff out, especially, it's basically the same in the East or the West. If you wear a certain kind of clothes, if you engage in a certain manner to be defined by the West or the East, then you might possibly be a divine being of some kind. And in fact, it may or may not be true, but it would be defined by a person living the way they think life should be lived here. To say that that is not a good thing would not be true. I mean, not a good thing to have people who are materially focused in a spiritual way. Because their relationship with others is a helping relationship also, even though they're elevated by what appears to be true. Energy can, to some degree, operate through them, but they will interfere naturally and normally with their particular belief systems, particular ways of understanding things, and expressing things for the benefit of themselves as well as others. This is what happens sometimes. All of us in our matter worlds tend to be like that, no matter what you believe. Often beliefs are regulated individually for the purpose of understanding life in a very particular way, which enchants themselves or comforts themselves in a kind of fundamental way of understanding life. It's very hard to change that once we've had it established within ourselves, because it gives us a sense of worth somehow. And we also regulate our sense of worth by, and our sense of friends sometimes, but who believes the way we believe. To broaden that out tremendously is very difficult for most people. To have people that are your friends that believe differently than you means you have to be compassionate, or at least sympathetic to some degree, without using that real compassionate word. It's a word that many of us use, but really relating to being sympathetic primarily, or a little bit directed towards an empathy of some kind from time to time. If you're empathetic or sympathetic. So in this, Sri Aurobindo had a very deep relationship with energy. Energy was moving through him, but he didn't only relate to it in a manner that is most common. He related to it in a manner that was related to trying to deeply understand it. He was trying to open the mind plane within him that takes into some kind, at least, of a recognition of emotion as well as the physical body. But he knew it was related to energy and the ability, interestingly, the ability to engage with the mind of a higher state using the intellect as a tool, and having there be a link between the two so that the higher state could use the intellect, the ability to write, the ability to make sense of things based on his experience, and write down material as he could connect with that higher state without interfering with it to the best of his ability. He understood that that was a piece of divine life as opposed to personality-centered life. And this life was, for him, would always be capitalized, or most often be capitalized, because he knew that it was something beyond what we treasure to be valued. That intellectual capacity to make sense of things relative to these planes. He also felt that if these two planes were joined, by the help of those who could handle that, there would be a greater possibility of higher state engagement after the initial stages of development were complete. And the initial stages of development are always a link up from on the physical side of things, all the way up to the head from the root center. And he talked in terms of, in his relationship, his chakras, because being an Indian, he was quite a very able being. I don't know whether I left anything out there. Let me take a look. Oh, I did, I'm sorry. Toshi also said, is the path for both matter and spirit, where we try to live life in the world, small l, while also trying to focus on energy at the same time. That is a beginning. That's probably why we're doing this, some of this stuff that we are doing. Trying to get the beginnings to be more conscious within us so that there could be an inflection of higher state, so that from time to time, whether we're aware of it or not, energy can operate through us without the personality interfering. This is a dilemma because, unfortunately, we believe as soon as worldwide. As soon as we can perceive that energy, then that's the point, and the only point where higher state can operate through us. This is just not true. It can operate through us even when we're not aware of it. But as the energy is increasing in a particular kind of way at a particular level, different than the personality's natural engagement style, that energy can operate through for the benefit of another. It's very interesting. The emphasis is so different in this concept of divine life. The energy is different in that beings at a higher state have no interest in being valued by others. Isn't that? It's an amazing thing. Their focus is on the perception of others as they are able to perceive those at a higher state. The most remarkable thing is, as we all grow, we can perceive levels of function of these chakras at these lower states. This is sometimes very valuable, but we're talking about personality interaction here. The personality has to be nurtured first to allow itself to let go of its need to be valued all the time as the only way to see things. And there are 8 billion people who are aching to be more right than the person sitting beside them. And this, if you could find humor in that, then laugh. But 2 seconds later, when you're engaging with someone else, if you could perceive yourself doing the same thing as what you were laughing at before, you might find that very fascinating. To me, that's really important. However, not everybody has my particular weird sense of humor from time to time. It would be an interesting thing. And some swamis in India talk about this, not very many, but some. If you could understand that there's a tremendous amount of help that can be given to others and you not know about it. Sometimes initially, that is how can I say this? That is how we start out being conscious. You start to know something is happening, but you don't know why it's happening. That is, if you can be honest with yourself. This is really difficult to do. But at the same time, you ache to be valued by not only others, but yourself. And that is part of our early on growing. Even when energy is being perceived by you, you'll want to be valued. You'll have this excessive need to be valued because you would believe that you were never valued very much during your life by those who are important to you. This is a fundamental all across the world. Not negative. It's just something that happens to us. And slowly, you begin to recognize that flow is kind of something to make friends with, not to use. But we all use it automatically. That is what we said. But to begin to allow just yourself just to watch it, as opposed to think it's yours. And thinking it's yours is part of the natural, normal thing that happens in the early going. And the more profoundly powerful the flow from your perspective, the more able you think you are. It is not like that. Matter of fact, it's the subtlest way of proceeding enables you more to understand the depth of engagement that each of us have in these matter worlds. That does not sound negative to me. Yet we do have rules about that as well, and how difficult it is to handle life at certain levels. Much more difficult than some, that's for sure. Toshi, I'm not sure if I got all of your question in. Really interesting one. Talking about this bankruptcy thing is, I find it very interesting in business. A number of people have gone bankrupt many, many times, but still continued on and worked, continued, and formed another business and became quite wealthy. I think the concept of continuity is very valuable. We have expectations about what things should be and how much of this we should have or of that, so that we can at least feel comfortable around people that we ascertain or think, because they told us that they're highly developed. We would like to be at least recognized by those folks, whoever they may be. Another thing that you should keep in mind, perhaps, that might be interesting in this whole process of movement in relationship to life with capital L, is that it can be intermittent. Let me explain that. Sometimes you'll be focused on your personality. It's the nature of how we develop. And we don't perceive energy moving through us. We have then reactions, which means additional focus on our personality, which hold us from allowing ourselves from softening down to try and be aware of that energy in, around us, or through us. This is a normal way of engaging that everyone is involved with. At times, when energy is so-called pretty strong moving through us, remember, it's using those energy chakras or vortexes or centers close to the physical form for the purpose of enabling you to perceive it a little bit better, but not able to perceive it beyond that. This is hard for us to understand. Very difficult. Because our relationship is, as a personality, is with our physical bodies. That's the major focus. You get up in the morning and you look in the mirror and you get ready. Ready for what? Your presentation. How you think you are, why you think you are that way. Natural. And engage with your favorite colors or the favorite way you have of parting your hair, not parting your hair. Engaging with how you think things should have been. We used to laugh at this, an old friend of mine. He loved the 60s, so he dressed like the 60s. And I said, well, I have an old pair of pants at home. Would you like to borrow them? And he said, "Hmm, yeah, it's a good, I can cut them off at the bottom if you're too tall." So we would laugh about these silly but valuable things that are involved with, we could call them idiosyncrasies of that denote the nature of a way of living, whatever that may be. That higher state gives us all the juice we need to do that, all the will, wherever you put your focus. And it has within it still that higher state, but a higher state at this lower form. And so, as I said before, you're trying to build that so that ultimately, as it engages in a deeper manner, you don't personalize as much. This is not so simple. So, in the meantime, you have to be relatively kind to yourself, respectful. Understand that you're not looking at you or trying to be aware of what you do to chastise you. You're trying to look to see what you do with that energy and then try to do something slightly different. Adapt a little bit, just a little bit. In the back of your mind, you'll hear those reflective responses that say, you should be doing better. These come from early, very early training. And if you're unlucky, all of those things still whisper in your ear. And in talking to that energy that flows, you can actually ask for help for that in a kind of a way that opens your awareness, wherever you put your thought, right, to more of how you function, just so you can know and understand. One aspect is when you see others who do some of these things, you judge them less because you're like them. Now, you may not want to know that. If you're linked into a belief system that says basically you're better than anybody else or other people, then you won't want to hear that. You have a right not to, but you have a right to. It is your right. Without devaluing yourself and overemphasizing a perception of value that from time to time exists, but not always. The same is true when Sri Aurobindo was talking about the very paradoxical understanding of divine life as it not being a life that should set you above others, but a life that enables you to be truly helpful to others in a higher manner and in a way that is gentle, respectful, kind for sure, but kind of closed mouth. It's very interesting, silent engagement. At the same time, of course, in India and many other places, the silence or the quietening of the emotional mind or the intellectual mind is used as a signal person that had it was superior. And in fact, it wasn't about that, never was. And he's trying to show that. Very astute, because he had an awareness of it. And through some of his writing, which, by the way, from some people's point of view, myself included, often was involved with writing something that was beyond the natural inclination to believe by those who had attained so-called recognition. But once again, the most interesting thing is that you grow through your own experience. And if you can begin to understand your experience, then maybe you can be helpful in a quiet way. A quiet way does not mean going into a cave. Quiet way means engaging with others and living little L life through big L life. Watching the energy operate through you for a purpose that is unknown to you. You can always tell, because when the so-called assessment processes is there, it's difficult for an individual to stop talking about how much she or he is helping everybody. The trick is everyone who grows begins to help others, and I mean everyone. Sometimes there is subtlety that is so beneficial to others. I've always said one of the greatest ways of helping another is through the medium of teaching, because you learn from others as well as expressing from yourself. And at some point, you are helped in your teaching. And there are many avenues of expression that you can use to be a part of what Sri Aurobindo is talking about. But nonetheless, an important question. Thank you, Toshi, very much. Very interesting. So there is another question, and from Lee Martin, and it's a doozy. And I don't know whether I can do my best with this one. I'll do my best, but we got to try to understand this a little bit better, perhaps. It's difficult for us. At one point, you said, and that is something I said in Roanoke, I guess. You said that compassion is not something we can do, but is done through us. Isn't that also true of grace? What difference is there? I did say that, and I'll stick with it. I also think that grace is something that is done to us as well. It's very interesting. I think grace is done to us often, but we don't always notice it. I think compassion, when it is done in us, we can't stop noticing it. It's like a flood of loving that overcomes us to some degree. Almost like a flood of loving that overcomes us. The dilemma in both cases is that how much compassion can we handle? Or a rendering of loving. How much can we handle? And the answer, I think, as I would consider, let's say, let me try and put it this way. If each and every one of us could handle a lot of loving or compassion for others and ourselves, wow, we would probably grow very quickly because compassion can stay in you. And it affects every aspect of you and your life, your physical body, your emotions, your mind. Loving for us is sometimes difficult. We believe that we're loving, and we are loving. For example, whatever personality you love the way you use it. You engage with others with it. You believe that is fundamentally the way you should be. That is an act of love for you. Compassion is different. You may understand or relate to another person who is unbelievably unable. And your personality may interfere and assess that person. That's not compassion. Compassion is that where you begin to understand where that occurrence, that context is so difficult for them because you know where that is, where they live, where they are there. You know it to be difficult because you are engaging in that place with them and understanding beyond any doubt. That, I think, is a little difficult for any of us. It often also happens when you see people who are honestly attempting the best they can with whatever capacity they have. And there's a flood of loving that occurs. It's kind of a loving, it's a sensation that can be all through your body. It has nothing to do with the personality whatsoever. And it emphasizes the ache for more love, more understanding, actually more recognition, anything that they are not getting. You understand that. You know it, and it's not an understanding here, or it's an understanding everywhere. It's an understanding that relates to something that lies within you. And in those moments, or those times, it's a flood of knowing that they're really good people no matter what. And that goodness lies within them. There is a loving aspect, even though they use it for their own purposes, in them that you can almost align with because you have the same thing in you. It's difficult. You can see the difficulty I'm having in explaining that, but nonetheless, when the sensation occurs, you could even define it as empathy or sympathy. You are aligning or empathizing. And you feel the flow of that energy or that compassion moving through you at the time. The other time you can almost feel that flow, but you feel an internal context relating to what compassion you feel that flow. And it comes in from another state. I think I've talked about that. The difficulty with compassion is it's given internally. It has a deeper range than sympathy and empathy. It lasts longer and recognizes itself beyond the personality sense of self. That's something I wrote down. If that makes any sense to anybody, maybe that might be helpful. Grace is a beautiful thing. And it can often be given, but we have a hard time perceiving it. There was an old story, if I could remember it, I would something like, oh, that was terrible. That dog bit you. And now you have to go to the doctors and get that fixed. That's awful. And the individual that happens is, we'll see. Got to the doctors, found out he had a particular kind of cancer that maybe could have been cured. And he said, well, and that person said, oh, you're so lucky that the dog bit you that you went to the hospital. You found that cancer. He said, we'll see. So the cancer was cured. And he said, you have to take this particular medicine all the rest of your life. Oh, you're really lucky you have this medicine that you can take all your life. He says, we'll see. And as time went on, medicine apparently, there's a new medicine that came out, but an old medicine didn't work very long. The guy said, oh, your old medicine didn't work very long. You're lucky that there's a new medicine now that you can use. Said, we'll see. And this goes on and on and on and on and on. You can make up your own story with this one. But the issue is we don't really understand the full nature of grace because we can't perceive it all the time. And we all, hopefully, would like to have it all the time. Might be a time to think about being hopeful that you can notice some of these things when they do happen. But it is a beautiful thing from my point of view. I think that's about all for this evening. I just want to thank you both, Lee and Toshi, for sending in those questions. I'm always interested in new questions because, as I said before, I like to talk about some stuff that you find interesting. Maybe we can be helpful just a little bit sometimes. We're just going to meditate now, and we'll set this up so that I'll close this off and keep the volume on. And give us a couple of minutes to get some music.
Namastasye, 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 namo Mata Bhuvaneshwari Namastasye, 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 namo namaha. Tvam Raja Rajeshwari Namastasye, 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 namo namaha. Sarvamangalamangale Shive Sarvarthasadhike Sharanye Triambake Devi Narayani Namostute Narayani Namostute Narayani Namostute Shanti, Shanti.